Welcome to Making Space For, the podcast where we embark on a journey to simplify, organize, and prioritize our lives. I'm your host, Paige Rabin, and each episode will explore the art of intentional living, helping you make room for what truly matters. In a world filled with constant noise and distractions, it's easy to find ourselves surrounded by things that don't contribute to our happiness or well-being. Making Space For is your guide to decluttering not just your physical space, but also your mind and soul. We'll dive into practical tips on downsizing, right-sizing, and the transformative power of letting go. Whether you're starting a cluttered closet, pondering legacy planning, or seeking the elusive balance between work and self-care, this podcast is your sanctuary for inspiration and actionable insights. Join us as we feature experts, share personal stories, and explore the profound impact of intentional living. Together, we'll navigate the journey towards a simpler, more fulfilling life. One where you have more of what matters and less of what doesn't. So are you ready to make space for the life you've always wanted? Let's dive in. This is Making Space For. Well, before we dive into today's episode, a quick shout out to our flagship company, A Move Handled with Care. As Denver Metro's premier senior and specialty move management expert since 2007, we've mastered the art of downsizing, right-sizing, organizing, and every step in between. From packing and moving to unpacking and staging, our experienced staff represent all stages of life, offering a compassionate touch to what matters most to you. So, if you're looking to make a seamless transition while keeping what truly matters in focus, trust A Move Handled with Care. Visit us at amovehandledwithcare.com or on Facebook or LinkedIn to discover the difference. Let's continue making space for the life you deserve. Welcome back to another episode of the Making Space For podcast. I'm your host, Paige Rabin, and today, in this episode, we sit down with Cheryl Chiasson, a co-owner of Bio1 Denver, to explore the often misunderstood topic of hoarding. Many of our clients may think that they are hoarders, but the reality is that hoarding exists on a spectrum. We'll discuss the different levels of hoarding and how there's a big difference between simply having a lot of stuff and the serious emotional, psychological, and health risk associated with true hoarding. Cheryl shares powerful case studies and real-life stories from her bio-cleaning work, shedding light on how families can recognize when it's time to seek professional help. With Cheryl's background in hospital marketing and a genuine passion for supporting others, this conversation provides valuable insights into understanding hoarding and how we can help people navigate these challenges. This is Making Space For, Understanding the Impact of Hoarding.
Ready.
All right. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for being here.
Glad to be here with you, Paige.
Yeah, super fun. I know we office, for those that don't know us, we office out of the same place, and we kind of didn't know that either until we stumbled in the hall too. And we have very similar businesses but different, and
they
so
complement each other.
They do. We talk a lot about how they complement each other. And today, the reason I wanted to invite you is to talk about. We're going to talk about hoarding. I think there's a misnomer on what hoarding is. So many people, throw it out there and they'll say something to the effect of like, oh, well, my mom, she's a hoarder. Uh-huh. And there may be some truth to that. And so I think between our experience and your experience, we can kind of maybe talk a little bit about what we see and what that looks like. So I'm curious to see, kind of your insights on that. But before we get started, I guess just tell us a little bit about who you are, how you came into this line of work, kind of your background and history.
You bet. Well, first of all, I didn't have this idea. I didn't grow up wanting to be in a business that does crime scene cleaning, hoarding cleanup, and drug testing and cleanup.
It wasn't what you dreamed of.
It is not what I dreamt of. However, it is a very good fit for my husband, Greg, and I.
Nice.
And there's a period in time several years ago where we both lost our job on the same hour on the same day by 9 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And we thought, what are we going to do now? Because it was late in our careers.
Yeah.
So we went down the path of looking for a business to buy or start, and we went down the path of franchising. And so actually our company, Bio1 Denver, is a franchise. Although it's locally owned and operated, it's our business.
Sure.
They trained us and support us some. But it is definitely our business, which is beautiful because we get to run it with our mission, with our values, and which is a great thing. However, we have a national presence and support when we need it.
That's nice.
And so in looking at businesses, Greg started a business, which is a printing business, and I became what's called a franchise consultant or broker. And as you do that and you present franchises to other people that are looking for businesses like we are, kind of like a realtor, you go business shopping. Mm. And I found Bio One, which was in Highlands Ranch where I was. That's where it was based. And the more I learned about it, I said, okay, I'm going to present this to clients. And I presented it to clients, and I said, oh, man, this fits me because you're helping people. You can make money helping people. That fit who we are, mission-based business, which we really liked. Mm-hmm. And it fit us, but Denver was sold. There was no option. And then the owners at the time were selling. They decided to sell. We decided to buy that business, and we took off running.
And that was how many years ago?
8 years ago.
8 years ago.
We're on year 8.
Good for you.
So we have lots of stories and lots of history, experiences, and we treasure that experience.
So for those who don't know what maybe a biohazard company is, what are like your core services, competencies, things like that?
If you think about something that you shouldn't clean up on your property or in your business, in a building or outside, it can be anything from a crime scene or a trauma with body fluids kind of thing. I won't go into the nitty gritty on that, to hoarding. And we'll talk about there's 5 levels of hoarding. And then drug use, we can test for it and mitigate it. So biohazards that aren't hazmat, like an oil spill on the highway.
Yeah.
So more like things you shouldn't clean up at home yourself that you need a professional for.
And we've also called you for some pet waste mitigation, but left behind. We've called you for lots of other like kind of strange things of like, if it's going to, I always think about it, if it's going to, without the proper PPE, will this be an issue or a hazard to my staff or my supplies? And so that's when we always think outside the box of how do we use Bio One Denver? And that's usually what it is the lens of if I take my supplies in here, I will never be able to use these again. Or if I put the supplies back on my truck, it will contaminate my truck and I'll never be able to use that truck again. And so just keeping our stuff safe and also our people, if it smells, if it's stuff that they shouldn't be touching. We don't have that proper training. And so you're always our extension. And that's how we've used you in the past, is like, you're always our extension when we need that extra help. And I think sometimes people don't realize when you're moving people, dealing with people is a messy job, right? No matter what you're doing. And sometimes in a move, things get tossed and moved and you find things you didn't know were there. It could be mold. It could be whatever it is. I will say, that's what we talked about is best practices of what's the best for the client, what's the best for the environment, and also what's the best for our staff. And so sometimes that is us not doing it. So that's when we've partnered with you. So that's another thing that we've used you for. But today what I brought you for is hoarding, because people ask us all the time, do you handle hoarding? And it's a complicated answer that we give because people don't understand. And that's what I would love to dive into a little bit is, what's having too much stuff and what is hoarding, and then those different levels, and when does it get to be dangerous? When does it get to be a biohazard? And what are those signs and symptoms kind of thing? Because I think we all lump it into maybe the TV show that we've all seen, and that's not necessarily what hoarding is.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
I was going to cover that today.
Yeah, I'm like, we will love the show, and I will guilty pleasure myself. I love to watch the before and after.
Oh, it's dramatic.
I watch a lady on Instagram who literally cleans for free. Maybe you've seen her. She goes in and cleans, and the whole time I'm cringing because I don't feel like she's in proper PPE, but nevertheless, I love when she's finished with it. So there is some sort of fascination with that, but let's talk about hoarding. So what would you talk about is hoarding in its entirety, right? So people lump it into one little basic thing, but how do you describe hoarding?
Hoarding.
Yeah.
Well, I'm first going to talk about the loosely used term hoarding. Oh, my dad's a car hoarder, or my brother is a vinyl record hoarder. No, they're collectors.
Yeah.
Unless that collection is making their home unusable.
Yes.
So there's a difference between clutter, collecting, and hoarding. Mm-hmm. A hoarder continues to allow the items that they are gathering to pile and pile, and they have a hard time. they actually have they have an emotional, irrational attachment to those items, and they can't let go of them. And it's a mental health condition.
Yes.
And they can't let go of them on their own.
Right. So I love that you said that: clutter, collections, and then hoarding. Because I will say, in our line of work, I can handle clutter and I can handle collections. Past that is when we pass the baton, because at that point, typically there's got to be some sort of mitigation or something brought in.
Right.
At that point, it's usually not just going in and, identifying a few things and helping, people sort through their collections, what they want, what they don't, finding someone to help sell it. That's a little beyond where we are. So you talked about the different levels of hoarding. What are those different levels of hoarding?
There are 5 levels of hoarding. So there's an organization called the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. And
Challenging disorganization.
Oh, by the way, a little story off the topic, but not. They have a little fact sheet that you can run on yourself to see if you have
hoarding tendencies,
or actually challenging disorganization tendencies.
Okay.
I did that little thing, and guess what?
Oh, are you challenging?
I have a challenging disorganization. You're the first person I've confessed that to.
Oh, does it say like what it is, or
I have that questionnaire in here somewhere.
Or like what, what's the thing that you are attached to?
It's not really a thing I'm attached to, but it might mean I have paperwork all over the place in my office. It might take me a few minutes to find that thing I need. My office is cluttered.
Okay.
So I'll tell you that now. It might mean I have several projects started, but not finished. I do finish them.
Okay.
Ask my husband, Greg. Takes me a bit. So I have lots of projects started, and my dad did that too. And, just things like that where everything isn't in its place as quick as it should be.
Got it. Okay.
And those are just some of the examples I remember. So I went, gulp. And I'm confessing that today.
Well, and I think we all have that, or the opposite, the over-index of like, I'm the person who throws everything away. And then people are like, well, did you hold on to that? And I'm like, no. And I'll tell my kids something like, well, it sounds like something I would have thrown away. And they're like, yeah, it does. It sounds like something you would have thrown away. And I'm like, so I'm on I over-index in the other direction.
Yep.
If we don't need it, we're tossing it. We're giving it. We're donating it. It's just, I purge constantly.
And I need to be more like you.
Well, but I think that's also too, like you can talk about it a lot, but like personalities and like maybe the way that you were raised, the way that you value things. And I will say the generations are changing a little bit too. We talk about that in our moving industry of like, we talk about it as move managers, our bread and butter is helping folks downsize.
My age, probably.
Yeah. And I'm like, but come our age, we all have disposable, reusable stuff that just, like we buy it because it looks nice for the season and then we change it out and this and that. And if you go into, the furniture, there's some folks I would say that are probably like more nostalgic and have, things like that. But I have very few things in my house that are nostalgic. It's all furniture that I've either purchased or purchased with my husband. We move houses, we get rid of that, we get new. So it's interesting how like we're talking about like this new generation, but there is such an attachment to things. And is that because people were depression babies, or depression kiddos that like grew up with, if you have it, you paid for it, it's worth something, hold on to it. People that, went through wars, people that, whatever that upbringing is, if they were rural, if they were, in the city kids tend to keep less because you can have less, when you have a large house and things like that. So it's interesting to talk about, organization and disorganization, but I think there's some changes in our culture or society a little bit around that as well. Would you agree?
I would agree. Our 2 millennial sons, they are minimalists to the nth.
Yeah.
And they know if they come to my house, I'm going to have food. And I'd like to share because after what you just said, I grew up in the country in Ohio. Mm-hmm. We grew most of our own food. Money was scarce. And after I had kids, actually, let me back up. Money was scarce. Finances turned into domestic violence. And I've realized this since I'm in the hoarding business. Yeah. After I had kids, I always have a lot of food. And I joke that I'm a food hoarder. I'm not a hoarder because I get rid of food when it's, if it's past its date or whatever. But I think I'm more of I want to make sure that if somebody comes to my house, I have enough food to give them.
Yeah.
And I do think that is, and you're actually a trained therapist. We could probably talk about that.
Oh, sure.
But that goes back to my childhood
For
and
sure.
probably to a food insecurity issue.
Absolutely. Well, there's also too, there's my guess too, just knowing you is that you're a very warm host. And so you also want people to feel welcomed and thoughtful, that you thought about them, coming over and things like that. Sure. My mom was that way. She always had, lots of food to provide people. It was because she loved to be the hostess with the mostest kind of thing. She always wanted to be able to whip up something.
Right.
My sister and I joke about it now that you could go to my mom's pantry and find ingredients to make pretty much something or anything all the time.
Same here.
And in my house, I will say, I am a little bit more that way. You go to my sister's house and she for sure has to go to the store every time. So you just never know. Cooking was never her thing. But attachments to things and items and the way that we were brought up, it very much influences this behavior.
Yes.
I think if anyone has seen the show, I mean, if you've seen this, broken down, there's a whole lot of guilt and shame when it comes to hoarding.
Absolutely.
And so people don't want to let people into their home to help,
Bingo.
Which I know we'll talk about, but is because there's so much guilt and shame around it. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that no one should feel guilt and shame when they get to a point where they need that kind of help.
Right. And that guilt is there. So, people will say, what is that difference? So clutter, let's go back to what's the difference between hoarding and clutter. I make up my own words sometimes. Clutter is when there's mail on the counter that you haven't dealt with, or there's the laundry that hasn't been folded and put away, or
the 7 junk drawers. I'm guilty of junk drawers.
Really?
I don't want to see it, so I put it in a junk drawer, but then the junk drawer never gets sorted, so then it's put away.
But nobody knows
about it.
That's right.
So everybody jokes about my junk drawers. I have several of them.
So that's not hoarding.
Right.
Or back to...
It's clutter. Yeah, it's we don't know what to do with it. We don't know if we should get rid of it, so it sits in there, and
But it's not on the counter where you can see it.
Yep.
So that's a little bit of stuff that needs to be dealt with. That is clutter. That is not hoarding. Mm-hmm. A collection that is in its place and organized is not hoarding. Hoarding is the continuance of items that are brought in. Maybe you have a shopping disorder. Maybe you just continually have Amazon dropping off boxes. Mm-hmm. You don't open. I had clients that they don't open the boxes. They just keep piling up, and you don't let go of the items. It really comes down to, because there is a line between clutter and hoarding. Mm-hmm. Clutter, you eventually organize. Hoarding, you don't let go of it, and your home becomes unusable to some degree. That's really the defining difference.
And not everywhere. Excuse me, in some places, right?
Right. It could be one room.
One room, one area.
Right. So let's dive into hoarding more about that unusability in the home, if you'd like.
Yeah.
It might be the bathroom and plumbing becomes unusable. It could be kitchen appliances. The major appliances are unusable. It can be the laundry. You can't use the laundry washer and dryer. Mm-hmm. If it's plumbing, it's going to be your kitchen sink, possibly your toilet, possibly your bathtub. Do you want me to share an example?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I'll tell you, I share these. I never want to draw attention to people's trauma. I just like to share things for people to understand. My purpose in sharing is to help somebody understand what their loved one might be experiencing.
Absolutely.
And to know it's not their fault.
Yes.
That it's a condition. Mm-hmm. One woman, PhD, after she passed, the family called us in to clean the home. They had no idea because nobody had been in there for, I think, 40 years or something. Mm-hmm. And the whole house was just piled. And we had sometimes we have to crawl over stuff to get to other rooms. And you wonder, how in the world do they live in there? Mm-hmm. So plumbing stopped working. So then she started using the bathtub.
Oh, no.
For her toilet. I'm not exaggerating. It was piled up to where she couldn't use the bathtub anymore. It was dried to where we had to get a hatchet, not a hatchet, the thing that has a pointing tip. I can't think of it. But anyway, we had to break it up with tools. And then she started just using the bathroom. She went to the far side of the bathroom and just used the floor and then worked her way out of the bathroom. And she weighed about 300 pounds. And so just used the floor, and piles and piles and piles of that.
That's
And
so unfortunate.
It is. And so guess what happened? She stopped inviting people into the house.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, what do you look for? What are signs? They don't have people inside their home. If they're going to meet you somewhere, they say, I'll pick you up, or you say, I'll pick you up. They come outside. You never come in the house.
Yeah.
And they may look dressed to the nines, and they look fantastic. You never know what their house looks like inside. So that's one example. We have lots of stories like that.
Yeah, and then the other thing is it's not as simple as, you know, I think when we encounter it, there's a lot of families who will say something to the effect, we're just going to get a dumpster. We're just going to get a dumpster, and we're just going to throw it all away.
Do.
And I'm like, well, that is definitely an approach, but not necessarily the most effective approach. So if you get a call, or if you get someone calling you to ask for help, how does that process look? How can we kind of debunk everyone's just going to pull up a dumpster and just throw all my stuff out?
Which is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. And so we're going to go back to the show Hoarders. I tell people when they call us, we tell them, please get that show out of your mind, because that's not how we work. And in fact, because we are nationwide, we are invited to do an episode, we as Buy One across the country. So we were on one show. I would have to look up the episode that it was, the season and the episode. But after being on that show, we declined to be on anymore because we saw behind the scenes all the dramatization, because that is not how we work. We start our process on the phone with that first call. It's usually a friend or family member, not the hoarder themselves, although it is sometimes. And we take the time to have a conversation. We put a lot of time that we do not charge for ahead of time into helping them. We try to help them understand the hoarder, and we give them tips on how to talk to them. There's do's and don'ts for that, for sure. And then we even say, if we need to come out and have a conversation with grandma or sis or your friend, whoever it is, we're happy to have a conversation. They don't always want to do that. Sometimes they're present, and sometimes their representative is the one who handles the whole thing. We ask for lists of things they definitely want to keep. We say if there are items that are contaminated by some of the things that happen, such as rodents, mold, other animal issues that happen, rotten food, all kinds of things. Yeah. Definitely let us know what you want to keep. If we find these items and they are affected, we'll have a conversation with you. The biggest thing we do in that process is really talk with the hoarder when we have that chance. And it may just be the representative that we talk to. We're not just coming in. We're not just junk haulers.
Yeah, you're not going to come in with a dumpster.
No offense to junk haulers, but we are different.
Yes.
And that we come in and we care about their stuff. We are there to work with their goals, not a custom. It's custom, not cookie cutter. Yeah. Just like you.
So, which I'm sure, every hoard cleanup, I'm sure then doesn't look the same when you're done.
No.
Just like every move for us, we always show like the best before and afters, but that's not always the case.
Right.
Sometimes, and I think the thing is embracing how people live is so important in this line of work.
Right.
Because the way that I live is different than the way that you live. And so if, maybe you're really into decorations and you've got lots of decorations and lots of things on the wall and drapes and heavy fabrics and things, and that's how you like to live. And I'm a very minimalist. I like minimal things on the wall. I don't like heavy drapery, things like that. Like, I can't make your space look like my space. And I think a lot of times we have this HD TV or like this idea that it's going to be beautifully clean and it's going to look just like it should look the way that the client wants it to look at the end. Right. And that may still look cluttered. That still may look to us. Yes. It may still look, junky to us, but to them it feels cozy. It feels warm. It feels familiar. It feels so when people ask us all the time, like, well, are you just going to make me get rid of everything? Absolutely not.
For
Absolutely
you or
not.
for us.
Yeah, and I don't want you to get rid of. What I want to do is focus on, it sounds like you are the same way. We want to focus on, I love that you asked for a list of what you want to keep. We are the same way. Let's focus on what you want, because when we help folks downsize, they are so focused on what won't go with them. And we're like, but no, let's focus on what will go with you. Let's talk about that first, because that's the most exciting piece. I've told this story before, but my grandmother lived they had a little cottage, kind of 2-bedroom with a little like living room den. And she did not want the dining table to be in there. She wanted her baby grand piano. Everyone thought she was nuts. My grandma was a musician her whole life. Played until almost the day she died. And she wanted her baby grand piano there. Wasn't in great shape. Didn't sound amazing. But it was hers. It was very important to her. And everyone thought she was nuts. But her whole dining room was her baby grand piano. And I love that story because when she downsized, we let it be her choice. So she didn't have a dining room. So when they would host, they would always go up to the main dining room and pay to do that, or we'd go out to eat or something. They decided like that wasn't the most important thing. And so what may look different, somebody may say, well, what in the world are we doing with this baby grand piano? It's what's really important to them. Yes. So that's lovely that you don't say like, here, give me the list of things that you really want to keep. I love that that's the focus first, because I think so many people are afraid that somebody's going to come in and throw it all away.
That's their biggest fear.
Yeah.
We've gone into rehab facilities. We've gone into when they may end up in a nursing home, and we need to go through their stuff because there are biohazards there. It's not something that a move handle with care could manage at that point. And we go talk with them, and we can take pictures, and we can text pictures to the representative or family member. We really work closely with them to make sure that we are doing the right thing. We put those lists on the wall. So it's really about them. But the good news is, even if they've kept more than we think they should, we've gotten rid of the biohazards. Yeah,
you've cleaned it up.
Cleaned and sometimes disinfected if that's what's required.
Yeah, because I think that's the other thing is some people don't realize when it goes from, like, do you guys have a threshold from when it goes from clean and just maybe, I don't know how to say it exactly, but where it becomes, it's not dirty now, it's a biohazard. Like, what are those things, those telltales that, like, when you tip the scale and it shouldn't be touched by a local caregiver or anybody else, you know what I mean?
If there's pathogens involved, such as human waste, animal waste, rotting food, any kind of a pest, cockroaches, any pathogen that could affect you and your health. So anything that's a danger to human health.
Okay. I love
if
that
makes
because
sense.
There are definitely things that, I mean, I'm sure I called you for several things and we were talking, some of the horror stories of things we've seen. And I'm like, when I just want to be like, okay, that's not for me. That's for Cheryl.
Well, and sometimes we get calls for things that we really need to refer to you because we're trained in biohazards.
Yeah.
And so therefore our ticket price is a little higher.
Sure.
Because we're trained for those things. And
you have to mitigate that for your staff, I'm sure. Yes. And also the PPE that you have to buy, which I don't think anyone realizes that, because we got ourselves into a situation. I was sharing with you a contract that we were doing, and we did basic mitigation for, making sure that we weren't cross-contaminating people's things.
You know the word.
Yeah, so we were trying to do that. So like plastic liners for our materials and things like that can be disposed of. That stuff is very expensive to purchase, and I don't think people realize that. I don't know about you too, but I'm sure our liability is very different as far as, what we do and the scope of work. But I think other people don't also understand that, like, for us, one of the rules for our liability insurance is that we can't have foot coverings. So we can't have foot coverings because we're movers. And so if you were to trip and fall with a bootie on, if you will, or if somebody asked you to remove your shoes. So it's like a no stop for us. Like shoes have to be worn by all of our staff. If you drop something on your foot, you can't be barefoot. And then the slipping and falling of things. And so when people don't realize we can't just put booties on and come on in. Like, we're moving furniture. If you've ever done that yourself, that's and you're going downstairs, you can't have anything slippery on the bottom. So there's things like that we are different in that way. And so having the proper PPE that keeps you safe is very expensive. And I don't think people understand that.
And so is our insurance.
Yeah, so is our insurance, yes.
So imagine if yours is.
Oh, yeah. I can't imagine what yours is. No.
And also because of what we're exposed to, what we're exposed to.
Yeah, and the proper training of your staff to make sure that they're safe.
Right.
Disinfecting stuff so that you even just, disrobing to go into their vehicle.
Right.
We've all been in those where they're just kind of icky, and then there's past the icky. And so I think that's the thing that people don't consider.
We go past the icky.
You do. Yeah. And that every time I'm like, no, that's not for me.
Well, and
we had a gentleman, I think I told you that, had birds.
Yes.
And I'm like, the bird free roamed. And
oh my.
And so it had bird, droppings all over the apartment. And so once you start moving stuff, it kicks that all up. And I'm like, this is biohazard number one. Like there's no way I'm sending in my staff to do this. So that's when we called you to do. And I remember talking to Greg on the phone. He goes, there's a bird. And I'm like, a bird. It's a pet. And it roams and it has just made a mess everywhere. And he's like everywhere. And I'm like, I sent him pictures. He's like, nope, everywhere. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's on the floor. It's on linoleum, carpet, other carpet. It was.
And he lived in that.
He did live in that.
Oh.
But that was, so when you guys came and I felt so much better because at least that was all gone. And we felt like we moved him to a new place. And I'm like, yes, we're going to start over. But I'm like, he's had so many years of that.
Yeah.
So how unsafe for that individual. But yeah, I was not sending my staff into bird droppings. That. Yeah.
And that brings about a really big issue in hoarding. And that is the environment.
Yeah.
And situations develop out of, if the plumbing stops working, what are they doing with their waste?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's sewage backups that are not dealt with. Talk about pathogens.
Mm-hmm.
There are mold. We often find mold as we start removing contents.
Of course.
We find mold. We know how to deal with that. We deal with that. But that is potentially toxic to that person.
If people are just getting, what are people who you and I both would deter from just getting a dumpster and throwing stuff away.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the things that people should know about that process and how it is damaging to both the environment and also to you as to your health if you're not properly suited up for that?
Back to the pathogens that might be, first of all, the insects. They could carry pests to other environments, their vehicle, to wherever they go after they leave there. Mold can be toxic. I certainly don't scare people with that, but it can really affect your lungs, your respiratory system,
sure.
other health issues, depending on the type of mold. Mm-hmm. I've looked all these things up and learned a lot through the years. And so I never try to scare somebody. I'm just real and I present facts. Sewage, if they're starting to touch human waste, whether it's just human waste or sewage, lots of pathogens that would be in there. And then let's say that they're just working and they touch their eye after touching that, and you don't even think about it. You might be...
And no one regulates, if I were to pick up a dumpster and put it out and start cleaning out, mom's house or whatever, no one is regulating what I put in that dumpster, right? So that just goes straight to the landfill.
From a pathogen, no.
And so that just goes straight to the landfill, and yeah, okay.
Although there's certain things you can't put in a dumpster, and you only know that if you do it all the time like us.
Yes.
Because some landfills take certain things and some don't.
Yeah.
Like tires and refrigerators, etc.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because donatable items, we deal with donatable items. There are certain things that are not donatable. Mattresses are not donatable. And people are always like, well, why? And I'm like, because they're sometimes considered a biohazard because of human skin cells, hair, all the things that you and I know about them. They talked about, when you buy a mattress in 7 or 8 years, it doubles its weight because of the cells from just being a human laying in a mattress. That's why we're supposed to get a new mattress every so often. And so people are always stunned that people won't take, a mattress. Well, it's perfectly fine. I'm like, but under a microscope, it's not.
No.
And so what do you do with those? Either they have to be dumped or they have to go to a recycling center and things like that. Right. So I don't think people always think about what is a biohazard and what can't be shared or donated or tossed in a dumpster. No, of course not.
Until we're trained, we got trained in this business, and that's how you learn these things, and likely the same for you.
So you do light hoarding too. So we probably never did go to the levels of hoarding. So maybe we should go back to the levels of hoarding.
There's 5 of those. And the first one, I don't have it memorized, but the first one is, there's some stuff. It's more like clutter plus. The home is still livable. The second level gets more into, there might be a pest, but it's dealt with quickly. And then 3, 4, and 5 get more into a room that's maybe not usable, And then the higher levels, there's more than one part of the house that's not usable. Exits are blocked by stuff, pests. And then there's also animal hoarding.
Oh, gosh, yes.
The highest number of cats in a hoarded house is 30-some that we've dealt with. And it is sad to me. It's sad.
You physically remove the animals?
No.
Okay.
And
Animal control does that?
Well, animal control and the health department gets involved.
Oh, okay.
And we are there because they're going to lose their property. The health department gets involved, and the city or county, usually that depends, is going to take their property away from them unless they deal with it. Mm-hmm. So someone like us comes in. I have scraped cat waste off of windowsills this thick.
Yeah.
It happens. They give them, and it's not logical, by the way. Hoarding is not logical.
No. And that's why, to go back to your original statement, is this is a mental illness, a mental condition of some sort, a distortion in thinking. And so this is definitely not something that is, not a choice sometimes.
Right.
It's a compulsion. We were talking before we started recording that while I have a therapy background and you've been doing this for a long time, we are not experts in this area. We just know the best way to help people with the services we provide.
Right.
Does not substitute for proper mental health, care,
Absolutely.
medications, consulting with your physician, none of that. We were talking about that before, that there is some of that, but that's also probably why we're good at our job, is because we have those backgrounds, and we are able to help people feel seen and heard, with this, because there's nothing more shameful than feeling like you can't invite somebody to your house because it's gotten too out of control.
Well, and my house was often like that when I was a kid. So and being vulnerable.
That's funny that you say that, because you had that as a kid. I think we've talked about that too, and some food insecurities and things like that. And so now you deal with hoarders. I was a military brat, and so I moved all the time. And so my parents are nomadic in nature. I mean, I can feel the itch in them right now that I can feel that they want to move, because they're just very nomadic in nature. And so I grew up just like your home is where your hat is, and new experiences and new things. So I didn't really ever hold on to a whole lot, because it was like, what was the point? And so,
look at our backgrounds.
Yeah, so it's like if you kind of know where people come from and why they end up in the job that they're in, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, it's interesting that you go into that and you have this empathy and compassion for this, where they are. And I absolutely love, we were just talking about this with our staff of like, family members don't want to talk about the stuff because they've already had that discussion. They're already rubbed by that, right? Like they're bothered by, to your point, the vinyl collection. They're annoyed with the vinyl collection because they've heard about it their whole life. And so they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to talk about it. But when I ask, tell me the story about these vinyls, it now becomes this like new energy of I can share it and then I can purge it. So they almost have to get it out, and it can't necessarily be with their family members. And so that's why, like, a company like yours coming in, it's not the same as family and friends with a dumpster. It's just not the same. That feels sometimes a little forced, a little trite, just not the same level of probably an area of expertise too, and what to do and how to do it. So,
and what's happening there to me is that I think they feel like their family's trying to take control.
Absolutely.
When we work with them, and I'm amazed at our team, and I think you probably are with yours as well. And, when I started out, it was me and one employee. Now we have a team.
Yep.
And the way they're able to talk with them, and they give us permission to take all those vinyls, or maybe they keep 5 of their favorite, and take the rest to donation.
Yeah.
They give us permission because we're not the family. And a lot of times family, and I have some language around do's and don'ts on dealing with your hoarder or someone else's hoarder. But they give us permission because of the way we approach them.
Yeah. So let's dive into that. What are some of the do's and don'ts?
You bet. And if you don't mind, I'm going to refer to my little sheet here.
Yeah.
Do's and don'ts of talking to someone with hoarding disorder. First of all, educate yourself about hoarding, whether it's your family or somebody else. I think we need to understand hoarding first before we can approach them. And most of us probably think, if we haven't looked at it before, that we think it's a choice.
Yeah.
And I'm going to confess, before I got into this business, My family member, I thought it was a choice. And you just think, they're doing it. And the more I say, the more they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that I understand the disorder, it's a different approach. Another tip on what to do is to listen and use the same language as they do. They might say, my collection, my vintage art. Reflect that, or it's called mirroring, I believe, in communication. Mirror the same thing. Don't call it junk.
Yeah.
Because it is not junk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're irrational. In fact, I was listening to a podcast coming here by a psychiatrist talking about hoarding. And he said sometimes they're even delusional. It's part of the condition.
And I love that you brought up the language piece, because sometimes we don't even catch the fact that we say certain things. I mean, I'll be honest that I have. The other day I was with a client and I was talking to one of my staff members, and I had this like kind of miscellaneous, like, what did I call it? Kind of odd, junky stuff is what I said.
Oh.
But what I meant was, like, in my mind, and my staff member knew what I meant, was I needed these kind of random things to fill a space.
Right.
So she was bringing me all the kind of weird, wacky, junky stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's what she knew I was looking for.
Right.
The client overheard me
No.
and said back, so you think I have wacky, junky stuff? And so I took that opportunity to apologize and say, I didn't mean it in that way. And he was like, no, it's fine. He goes, I see what you're saying. He goes, and should I get rid of it? And I'm like, I mean, if you use it. So then we had a good discussion about that. And so it's funny that you say that, because even us, like, we get in that, and sometimes you're in the mode of what you're doing and you say things, but some of that can be super hurtful. And so just being very conscious of what you say. So I love the mirroring idea of, if they call it a collection, if they call it their prized possessions, if they call it their family heirlooms, whatever that is, that's what we're repeating back to them. I love that.
However, I agree with you, and I agree with this suggestion. However, I think that he already trusted you.
Oh, sure.
With the way he approached it.
Yes. And because he kind of laughed about it. But then I just realized, like, sometimes when you say things in a flippant way, like, you don't realize that can come across as, you didn't mean it that way, obviously, but somebody could take it that way. And so when you have been invited into someone's home in their personal space, there's a very, very, personal space to be in. And so just having that respect for it. Yeah.
And whether it's you and your team working with stuff that they've had for years, or us with a hoarder who has had stuff for years, because this doesn't happen overnight with the hoarder.
No.
They've had it a long time.
Yeah.
So we need to be respectful of that.
Yeah.
Another thing, typically their home is unsafe for them.
Yeah.
And focus on the safety. Don't say your home is a mess. Say, Mom, I see that, I'm concerned that you're going to fall and trip over this stuff. How about we take a look at what's here, approach it about their safety.
Yeah.
Another thing to do. And then this says offer to help. And I'm going to add a caveat to that. They don't usually want family to help, in my experience.
Yeah.
So I would say offer to help, but back off if they say no. Do you have any comments on that, or do you see it differently?
Yes and no. And I will say, I think it matters on the relationship with the person, because, we deal with a lot of adult children and things like that. And so I will say, I can tell really quickly how to engage based on the relationship that I see between mom and daughter, mom and son, whatever that might be. And then dealing with it over and over and over again. We also, it's not always the same, but you can kind of tell how that's going to go. And sometimes it's not that person. Sometimes it's the daughter-in-law who is a little farther removed, and maybe they have a sweet relationship. And so she trusts her a little bit more because it's not her son. It's not her daughter. Maybe it's the friend or the neighbor or whoever it is that's involved. And so it's always kind of like you kind of sleuth it out to figure out who's the right person. And then you can also tell the ones that you're like, absolutely not. I'm not talking to their family at all. Like, that would make it absolutely worse. And they trust me more than they trust, and those people, I will say, are farther and fewer between. But a lot of times too, you can just see the clashing of, and so sometimes those are the ones that we encourage to go get lunch.
Oh yeah.
Don't be on site. Go get lunch, and
here's
we're gonna,
$20.
Yeah,
Please go get some lunch.
We'll go. Yeah, let
it.
us get this settled, and then you come back. And if you don't like how we have it, because a lot of times people want to hold the stick so tight, they want to make every decision, they want to touch everything. I'm sure you've heard it too. Clients that will say, "I need to touch everything in the house." And then we tell them just realistically how long and how many hours it will take to touch everything in their house.
Ditto.
So you can pay us to do that. We are happy to touch everything in this house. But just so you know, we're looking at X amount of hours, and we're talking hundreds of hours.
Oh, yeah.
If you would like for us to do that, we can. We need to start today. Or the other thing is this isn't reasonable because let's say they're moving. They've had a fall and they can't. So we're moving in 2 weeks. There's no way to touch everything. So why don't we hit the high points, going back to the list, make a list of all the non-negotiables that have to go with you. And then from there, we can make, maybe we have phase 2. Maybe they're not going to sell your property. And usually by the time you transition them, or usually by the time you get them out of that space, they can kind of breathe and let that go. And then they don't have the time, energy, or the care to go back. And then you can, work on phase 2, which is kind of clearing out the property. But to your point of I think it's always figuring out who the person is that speaks to them. And sometimes it's you, me, our staff, whoever that is. It's somebody who's not related to them at all. Because I can listen to the stories, but also I can listen to the stories, cut you off, and make you make a choice.
Yes.
I can guide you this way. Exactly. So thanks for telling us the story, but now which one do you want? Do you want this gravy boat or this gravy boat? You don't need two. So that sort of thing.
And I'm going to clarify. In my mind, I was thinking offer to help the whole process.
Oh, yeah.
Without a professional coming in like us.
Oh, yeah.
Because
the DIY movers.
Yeah. Yes, the DIY movers that were going to pack mom and move her, and it takes them 5 days, and a U-Haul that didn't show up, and their hired labor that they got that didn't show up on time. Yeah, I have the same thing. So we do find that one person,
yep.
And sometimes it is us, but we like to work with that person when
Sure.
we can. But in my mind, I was thinking it's the one person that's going to help mom, and you're going to work together for 7 days in a row, and that doesn't usually work.
No,
yeah.
It's not going to work.
And then the last thing under here, which jumps off from the last one, offer to help, encourage the hoarder to seek professional help.
Yes.
And there's 2 things about that. I would break that off into professional help for the hoarding, cleaning, the hoarding mitigation itself, and the other is therapy or whatever that looks like.
Do you have a resource list? Is this kind of like a process that you go through with them, when you do this? Or?
I have a handful of folks,
okay.
And then I've discovered some more because I understand now that there's groups and there's other things that are out there, and I'm continually honing that list.
That's great.
Yes. Do we want to talk about some don'ts?
Yes.
Because I think they're as important as the do's.
Probably more important.
Glad to hear it. Don't be judgmental.
Yeah. Which is hard to do. Remember wonky, junky stuff? I said the same thing the other day. So we all have that judgment. Yes, it's really hard to do, but that's probably the number one thing you can do when working in this business.
I agree. And when talking about this, when I think about, does a smoker want to hear you nag them about how terrible smoking is? Does an alcoholic want to hear you nag them about how terrible alcohol is?
Yeah.
A hoarder doesn't want to hear it either. So don't be judgmental. Do not argue with the person. Trying to take control of them or force them digs them in a deeper hole, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you have something, it kind of brings up too, especially if you're working with older adults who may be having signs now of early dementia, things like that, because so many people want to argue with somebody with dementia and it just goes nowhere. You can't argue that. It will just turn south. It always does. And so when you're working with people, it may be the hoarding, but it may be hoarding and it may be something else. And a lot of times with older adults, it's mental confusion, signs of dementia. It can just be cognitive impairment or their environment that is causing this all to happen. They can't navigate their home. They're frustrated. They're not moving around. They're probably not drinking and eating properly.
Right.
They're not going to the bathroom. They maybe have a urinary tract infection. All of the things that you and I have seen because their environment has trapped them in that, whether it's just clutter like I deal with or whether it's a full hoard that you deal with.
I like how you said that. And early in my healthcare marketing career, way back when, I learned a lot about working with Alzheimer's patients. And that's what I learned, not to argue with them.
Yeah.
Just play along.
You join into the conversation and help get them on the right path. You join in the conversation. So if they're talking about their daughter who is not here,
right,
you go with it. You go with the conversation. You let it flow. Don't fight them on it because their brain will fight you on whether their daughter is present. That sort of thing. So, and then how do you help them get back on? There's a lot of this stuff that I feel like we are dealing with in our fields that are, mental health professionals, we all know that mental health at large is our biggest issue right now.
Sure.
And then you add
absolutely.
these environmental problems that are just making that worse because they can't navigate. They're not, they're not caring for themselves.
Well, it seems to me, and especially with what I heard from the psychiatrist driving here, was that there are a number of cognitive issues that play into hoarding disorder.
Yeah.
So I think we're in agreement there. Do not try to minimize the challenge. It's a huge challenge to
we
them.
can get this in, a couple days, Mom. Get a dumpster, and in a couple days we'll clean this all out. No big deal. Yes.
It is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
And in fact, this same podcast, they were talking about the issue. You can show them a picture of a hoarded room and that same room cleaned up, and they're delusional enough. They truly don't see the difference between those two rooms. Mm-hmm. That really struck me. They truly don't see the difference.
Or feel maybe more comforted by the look of the stuff.
Because that's what they live in.
Yes, exactly. Going back to the way that we both live, like if you live in clutter, that's what feels comfortable to you. If you live in, kind of stark, that's what feels comfortable to you. So you can't, like I coach our staff all the time of like, it's not going to be as pretty as we want it to be, but it's what they want it to be. So if that's what they want and they're happy with it, we take a photo of it and we're like, oh, this isn't what, but it's just not what we want for them.
My team feels frustrated with that too, and I'm going to take that tip back.
It's really hard because I'm like, but did they live in that clutter before? Well, yeah. And so a lot of times too, we'll undo a box, and I mean, this has happened a lot. You'll undo a box and it looks like chaos in the box.
Right.
And I'll go to my staff and go, we are professional packers. Like, this is not how this should look. But they're like, but you should see what we were dealing with on the other end. Sometimes to understand what you started with was why you just had to, at some point, put it in a box to get it to, next destination, to be able to just pile it up the way that it was. It wasn't folded. The clothes weren't folded. They were just piled and piled and piled. Well, you can spend hours folding, or you can put it in a box and we can move that, to the next location. So there's been a lot of training in that too, because sometimes you'll open something and you're like, this is chaos. Well, it started in chaos.
It was chaos.
Yeah, it started in chaos. So, and we always feel better because at least it's like been wiped down, or like it's been taken out of like the dirty place and put back, and so then it feels better. Like we always feel like we've left them in a better place when you get them out of that environment.
And that is a good feeling. That
is a great feeling. Yes.
Another good tip for don't be discouraging. It's easy to get frustrated. I've experienced that with my family member who I think is a level 1, and that doesn't help them. Mm-hmm. Just say, and I think part of that too is if they've had enough today, stop. When you're talking to them, just stop. If you can see that they're frustrated, stop the conversation, because that discourages them.
Yeah.
And so all of those conversations, all of those things that what I say is put yourself in their place. And it's hard to do if you don't have the hoarding condition.
Right.
But think about if it's something in your life that needs to be fixed or addressed. Let me say addressed, not fixed for hoarding disorder. If it needs to be addressed, how do you want someone to approach you? Mm-hmm. And how do you want to be talked to? How would you want them to deal with it?
Exactly.
Do we have time to talk a little bit about a fact sheet?
Yeah.
Or are we out of time?
No, we can talk a little bit about that.
Just to help us understand, is it collecting? Is it compulsive acquiring, or is it hoarding? Mm-hmm. A couple of examples. Let's say you go out and buy something, and you buy it, and you base it on the collections, on your needs. It's your collection. You think you want it. So that's collecting. And it's compulsive shopping if you say, I can always buy more, and I usually do. Mm-hmm. It's hoarding if I might need it later. The items have great value, especially if it's free, practically irresistible, or even stolen. So that just shows that there's a different motive for it and a different outcome.
Yes. That's the key, is the motive and like the the understanding of where it's coming from. And also when you're speaking to them about it, you can kind of pick up on that, where, you're going to lose those battles on certain things because they're non-negotiables. Right. And if that non-negotiable is the pile of papers that the retired CPA will not get rid of, it kind of tracks, right? Like you understand that's who they were. It's their identity, paper, numbers, all that stuff really matters to them. And so that's the non-negotiable. And maybe they're willing to purge in the kitchen. So you can't have it all sometimes. You can purge in some areas and not in some. And so I think that's the other thing too, is like, where can you encourage them? What isn't that important to them? Maybe they're not into the garage stuff. Maybe it's a retired widow who, is like, I don't need tools and tinkering things. And so yes, let's get rid of all this, but she wants all of her sewing and all of the fabric and all of the things, because that's really important to her. And so what can you work on? It's not like an all or nothing. And I think, again, getting the kind of those shows and that dramatization out of your mind, if it doesn't have to be this massive overhaul to be effective.
To boil that down, I like how you just put that. To boil it down, it's about them, what's important to them and what's not. Yeah. I think it's simply put. We focus on them and their wants. Yeah. And I don't say needs, because a hoarder thinks they need it all. They need everything. Yeah. And they don't.
Yes.
But it's about, what do they really want? And like you said, what is the non-negotiable?
And it's also having the language to talk to them about, like you said, safety. It's not safe to have molded food. Right. It's not safe to have, live in your waste. Like, let's get you to where that is, those are the top priorities. Everything else we can kind of deal with from there. So if that's what the top priorities are. And I think this, on our end, when it's the smaller stuff, what are those things, like we said, that are just like, you can pick and choose, like, what are the safety things? Because I've gone into homes where it's just, we always call it like, it's clutter plus, like you said, it's a clutter plus. It's like, that's just a lot of stuff. It hasn't been cleaned, and you can't clean it because there's so much of it. So how do we get just down to what you're looking for? So, the Hummel collection. Well, maybe can we get it down to 10 Hummels, and, we get it down to, we're not telling you to get rid of all of them. What are your 10 favorites? Spend the time to go through the stories of each one, where you got it, who you gave it to, all of those sort of things, and then be able to cleave what's left. So we're not telling you to get rid of it all, but I think that's the other thing too, is there's just a misnomer that we're going to come in with this grand scope, and it's going to just be like this, big reveal. And it may not be that. It may just be cleaner. It may just be more tidied. It may be a safer environment that they can actually navigate. It may not be what you think is this grand, reveal at the end of, sparkly clean and nothing in there. That's not going to look like home to them.
And where does that conversation start? Where do we start dealing with that?
I think that's a great question, because I think a lot of times, and especially in our world, people delay getting care. They delay the social desires and needs that they have because they're isolated in their home. Right. Maybe it's a financial issue that they no longer can maintain and afford their property. So they are delaying that because of the stuff. And so when you get, in my opinion, when you get to the point where they're delaying things they need because of their things, whether that's level of clutter that a move handled with care can do, or full hoarding that Bio One can do, that's when I think you seek help. That's when I think you have those conversations with your loved ones. Hey, I met this company. I heard this company. They were talking about this. They have a very soft and empathetic approach to how they're going to deal with it. They're not coming with a dumpster. Let's give them a call and let's just have them come out. I'm assuming you'll go out, you'll talk to them, use, like you said, a phone conversation, really kind of earn their trust to be able to allow us into that sacred space to have that conversation.
Yes. And that starts, like I say, that first call from whether it's the hoarder or they're a representative. Yeah. And sometimes they're just gathering information. And we make sure they gather enough information to know that it's not cookie cutter and that it's all about that hoarder and what they really need.
Yeah. And I'll say the last question maybe that we can talk about too is, the value proposition that I feel like people are afraid of how much it's going to cost for us to do it, for you to do it. And maybe speak to, in your experience, like the DIY situation and when hiring a professional, and when does that make the most sense for people? In my opinion, always, but not always, right? So when does that kind of like the pros and cons make sense for people?
If there is if it's just some clutter and somebody is able to do that and help them, I think that makes sense for them to DIY it, unless no one is able to help or wants to do it. Then sure, hire someone like you or me. But it's going to be less if they hire you. So that makes more sense.
And I think the other thing too is when I would say the value proposition is when the time that it would take.
Yes.
The time that it would take you to do it, whether it's an adult child or a friend or family member to take off work, to, all of the labor, maybe it's the physical ramifications, the value proposition is there of, is it safe for me to clean this out? Should I be lifting things into a dumpster? Should I be doing these things? The value proposition I feel like is there as well. And then I think the other piece of it is if it's truly taking them away from the decision and you can't get over the hump, sometimes you need somebody to come in and ignite that fire. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
adding to that, I would say that it's sometimes causes a separation between the two parties. It causes tension. They end up not talking to each other.
Yeah.
Then they're distant. So it, again, comes down to relationship, like you talked earlier.
Well, and then the end result too, like the getting to that end result, how is your life going to be benefited more at that point? You're in a cleaner environment. You can navigate your environment. For us, if we're moving folks, into senior living, maybe they now have a social engagement. Maybe they have access to healthcare. Maybe they have access to 24-hour, somebody checking in on them, things like that. Like, what are you gaining? What do you have to give up to gain? And I think that's the other thing too, is like when you feel like that, the scale tips and what you're going to get on the other end, I think is really beneficial, that kind of value proposition, because everyone thinks we're too expensive and we are not cheap. You've said it. I've said it. We are not the cheapest way to move.
And there's a reason.
And there's a reason for that. We talked about it, is the mitigation, the skills, the experience, the tools, the efficiencies. I had a client the other day that just raved about our services. He goes, the last time I moved, it took me 5 days to do this by myself. And he's like, you did it in 2. And he's like, and I'm completely set up. I'm working from home. And he's like, and I have no boxes and no paper anywhere in my house. He's like, if I had known, every dollar well spent. And I said, we'd love to put it all back in the box, put it back in your house and have you do it and see what it cost. Because my guess is it probably would be about the same. Because I don't think people realize our efficiencies, the training that you have, like we're doing it more efficiently because we're trying to get in and out. Like, we don't want to be on this project for days and days and days. We want to be in and out of that project.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to get it done as efficiently as possible. If we give you a quote, we want to stick to our quote. So now, that's on us to mitigate that. And I think that's the other thing too, is people don't always understand that, like, while we are expensive, the value proposition, I feel like, we can only say that because we've experienced it our way. I just hope more people will do that. And I think in the hoarding space, to feel confident that seeking professional help, whether that is from a hoarder mitigator, a move manager, a mental health professional, seeking professional help only just makes it that much better.
Absolutely. And when it comes to hoarding cleanup, moving, maybe they don't need resources afterwards. Hoarding, they definitely need some follow-up, in my opinion, and the research, that they need some follow-up, perhaps therapy or some kind of professional help, or they're just going to re-hoard.
Yep.
And we actually have clients we've been to some places 3 times over the years.
Yeah.
And in fact, one gal that we've been to, we've now done 3 different projects for her.
Wow.
The first time it was her sister. The second time we did it for her, but we never saw her. This last time, she called and says, you guys are just the best. I'm moving into my forever home, and it needs to be you guys. I want you guys, and I'm going to interact with you.
That's great.
That almost gives me chills.
Yeah, that's the best. That's the best.
Yes.
Well, Cheryl, I love hanging out with you both professionally and personally.
Likewise.
Yeah, so By All One Denver also offices out of the Village Workspace. So if ever you're in the area, stop by, say hello to us.
Yes.
Yeah, we're super involved. I met you at the Chamber, I think, several years ago. I think that's how it all started. Chamber? Yeah. So we're in the community, we're around, and I love women entrepreneurs that are out there just trying to make it better, right?
We are making it better.
We are.
That's right.
One hoarder at a time, or one move at a time, or one personal connection at a time. I think that's the other thing too, is we're really good at connecting. We may not have the answer, but we know it's like, hey, connect with this person. They know how to help. They know how to,
And to me, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Is a community of women entrepreneurs supporting each other and whatever that takes.
Yeah. Thanks for coming and chatting today.
Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here. And let's just keep on helping people.
Sounds good. That wraps up another inspiring episode of the Making Space For podcast. A huge thank you to our incredible guests and to you, our cherished listeners. Your journey to intentional living begins with each small step, and we're honored to be a part of it. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider liking, subscribing, and rating our podcast on your favorite platform. Before we part ways, a friendly reminder, if you're embarking on a move or seeking expert guidance in downsizing, remember A Move Handled with Care in Denver. With over 15 years of experience in senior and specialty move management, we're here to transform your transition into a seamless, stress-free experience. Visit amovehandledwithcare.com for more information, and let's continue making space for the life you've always wanted. Until next time, stay inspired, stay intentional, and keep making space for what matters most.